Hi guys, today we deal on the basics of orthodontics. On moving on to it, the first ever topic we will deal is growth and development. So moving on to the topic, first let's discuss it under the following headings: the definition of growth and development, factors affecting growth, the growth spurts, the growth site and growth center, and theories of growth and development. So the definition of growth and development proposed by Thor is growth refers to increase in size, whereas development is a progress towards maturity. So these are the simple definitions of growth which can be easily recalled by you during the times of exams. So now, the factors which can be associated with physical growth can be, of course, the hereditary factors, which is bigenetically arrived from paternal and maternal traits. Then comes to your sex, because females tends to mature at an earlier age than the male sex. Now, coming on to nutrition, a well-balanced nutrition or nourishment plays an important role in the growth and development of an individual. Now, the various illnesses like syphilis or any congenital abnormality can also reduce the growth and development of an individual. Moving to the others, we have factors such as race, socioeconomic backgrounds. There can be various other environmental changes which can also affect the growth and development of an individual. Now, moving slowly into the growth and development concepts, first we should know the timings of growth spurts. Why are growth spurts so important in both boys and girls is because we can intercept an early approach towards orthodontic treatments in which the malocclusion can be intercepted. So in girls, the growth tends to be just normal before birth, as well as up to the 3 years of age, just like boys. But you clearly see a age difference, which is like 7 to 9 years and 8 to 9 years, which is a difference of 1 to 2 years between boys and girls. So girls tends to mature at a faster rate than boys. So an earlier treatment planning is recommended for girls. Moving on to which the pubertal timings of girls are also at an early onset, that is 11 to 13 years, and for boys it is only from 14 to 16 years. So a girl child should be treated for malocclusion at an earlier age than on a boy of the same age. Moving on to the differential growth curve scientifically, we have the Scammonn's growth curve, cephalocaudal gradient of growth. So moving on to these curves are very important in knowing the normal development of various organs of our body. So here we have discussed a few in quite detail. So the S-shaped curve generally depicts a normal general growth of an individual. So you can trace the curve around here, in which the general growth of that particular individual is tend to have an S shape. That means it has various spurts and it has an S-shaped curve, and later it comes into a saturated part. Whereas the lymphoid has to tend a 200% growth phase completed by the time you reach your adulthood. Whereas the neural also has a steady developmental phase. The maxillary mandible generally has a mimicking of the general growth of the individual. So these curves gives us an insight of how the normal development of an individual takes place. Now, looking on to the genital, this tends to have an accelerated growth spurt during the pubertal. So when you trace the years back, it's between 10 years and 20 years where the individual matures in its genitals with the secondary and primary sexual characters. So these are important in keeping or planning how the orthodontic treatment should be initiated and to be carried out. Moving on to the cephalocaudal grade of growth is also very important because majority of the craniofacial structures associated with an individual has a progressive but a regressive growth of head size. So here clearly you can see that the 50% of the skull or the head size is gradually reduced only to up to 12% in a fully grown adult. So seeing on a 2-month intrauterine fetus, you know the larger of the space is occupied by the head or the cranial space, which has a reduction, which a progressive reduction towards your adulthood. So in adulthood, the caudal or the the trunk tends to occupy more than half of the individual than its head. So these are all the basic concepts in which the craniofacial structures develop. So there is a regressive growth from the head size from 50% continuously progressing on to a 15% or a 12%. Moving on to the craniofacial growth gradient, it's an important aspect because At birth, definitely the cranium is larger than the face, which regresses as the sutures tends to grow more in the cranium. So depicted in the figure, we have a larger cranial space in a fetal or an embryonal or at birth than compared to a full grown adult skull. So that is mainly because of the sutural or the development of face and other maxillofacial structures. Moving on to the general concepts of growth site and growth center is very important to regulate the different growth and the growth patterns of an individual, or you can give an orthodontic appliance, a removable appliance. All this tends to have an important aspect of which area you are targeting to focus. So first, what is growth site? A site is just merely a location in which the growth tends to occur most commonly. But whereas a growth center is independent of all the factors, irrespective of whatever happens, growth is just taking place in them. So it can be genetically controlled though, but it plays an important role in the overall development of craniofacial structures. Now, an important aspect that you should always keep in mind is growth centers are also sites, but not all sites are growth centers. So this is an important aspect to be checklist every time, because you should know a region of a bone, especially a mandible or a maxilla, which you are targeting, should either belong to a growth center, preferably than a growth site. Now, slowly we move on to the various theories postulated by various people on theories of growth. So mainly we focus ourselves on four, which is mainly asked for exams. But one is genetic theory, other is sutural theory, cartilaginous theory, and functional matrix concept. Now, moving to the earliest theory is called the genetic theory, which was proposed in the years 1950s to 1970s, which was based on more of an observational data, in which the genetic concept was given highly importance, or the hereditary or the family history tends to give a lot of importance in genetic theory. Moving on to which we came across a sutural theory, which was much more scientifically explained, in which the growth site played an important role and not the growth center. So what was this theory was of course proposed by Seicher in 1955, in which he suggested that the sutures are tend to be the growth site, which tend to grow towards each other and completes the process of development or the bone growth. So sutures are generally present between two bones, and these two bones grow towards a suture, or the sutural ends proliferate towards each other, completing the growth. So they complete the growth of the cranium, especially because you have a lot of sutures present in the craniofacial regions. So it is the primary event in sutural growth is a proliferation of the connective tissue between the two bones. So if the sutural tissue proliferates, it creates a space for the appositional growth at the borders of the bone. So it just means that the two bones fuse together each other to the proliferation of the suture that is present between them. Moving on to which we have few drawbacks of this theory, in which the research further progressed and gave us a notion that auto transplants of such sutures overall failed. So if you have to do an in vivo or a vivo test in which the suture or the growth sites of such sutures were replaced or placed in other mediums, it doesn't grow well. Then extirpation of the sutures has no appreciable effect on the growth of the overall skeleton. The shape and growth within the sutures is always dependent on the external stimuli. It is possible to bring that the sutural growth can be also altered by the mechanical stresses that you can apply. So this is all the drawbacks of this theory, which led to the concept of another theory called this functional matrix concept. So before moving to this concept, the widely and the most renownedly accepted concept of growth and development is the functional matrix concept, which was proposed by Melvin Morse, and it had two compartments called as the functional matrix component as well as a skeletal unit. So when you describe what is a functional cranial component, you have got two main subcategories here, or the two main parts of this component includes the functional matrix as well as a skeletal unit.